Welcome to the American federal system. Before we begin, let me offer one suggestion. At first glance, these slides may look like they contain a lot of information, and they do. Don't let that discourage you. They're designed to be learning guides, not something you need to memorize all at once. As you move through the lessons, pause after each slide, study the graphic, and then listen to the narration. The visuals will help you see how each model of federalism connects to the next. Rather than memorizing definitions, think of this chapter as the story of how power is shared between the national government and the states, and how that relationship has evolved over time. So take your time, enjoy the journey, and let's begin our story of American federalism. Let's begin with dual federalism, often called the layer cake model. Dual federalism is a model in which federal and state governments exercise separate constitutional powers with very little overlap. Like the distinct layers of a cake, each level of government performs its own responsibilities independently. Think about slicing into a 3-layer cake. Each layer remains separate. Early in American history, the federal government focused on responsibilities such as national defense, foreign affairs, and printing money. State governments handled issues like education, policing, and elections, while local governments provided community services such as fire protection and zoning. The one thing to remember is this: separate layers equal separate powers. Now let's look at cooperative federalism, often called the marble cake model. Cooperative federalism is a model in which the federal and state governments work together by sharing responsibilities, funding, and administration of public programs. Because their responsibilities overlap, political scientists compared this relationship to a marble cake. Unlike the separate layers of the layer cake, the ingredients in a marble cake are mixed together and cannot be separated. Programs such as Medicaid, interstate highways, FEMA disaster relief, and education grants all require cooperation between the national and state governments. The one thing to remember is this: mixed cake equals mixed responsibilities. Next is centralized federalism. Centralized federalism describes periods when the national government assumes greater authority and leadership, often during national crises or major policy initiatives. During these times, the federal government takes the lead in setting priorities, providing funding, and coordinating a nationwide response. Examples include the New Deal, World War II, Great Society programs, and national emergency responses. This does not mean states disappear. It means the federal government assumes a larger leadership role, while state and local governments often help carry out national policies. The one thing to remember is this: when national challenges arise, the federal government takes the lead. Next is fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism is the use of federal money to encourage states to pursue national priorities. Instead of relying only on laws and regulations, the federal government often influences state policy by providing grants and aids to support programs and services. The process is straightforward. Citizens and businesses pay federal taxes. Congress appropriates these funds, and the money is distributed to states through grants. Many grants include conditions states must follow if they accept the funding. States then administer the programs and deliver services to their residents. The one thing to remember is this: follow the money. Federal dollars often influence state and local policy. Now let's turn to New Federalism. New Federalism is an approach that seeks to return more authority and decision-making to state and local governments. Rather than having Washington direct every aspect of public policy, New Federalism encourages states to take a larger role in solving problems and designing programs that meet local needs. Two important terms are devolution and block grants. Devolution means transferring responsibility from the national government to the states. Block grants give states more flexibility in deciding how federal funds will be spent. Supporters like local flexibility, while critics worry services may vary widely by state. The one thing to remember is this: less Washington, more local solutions. Next, we examine partisan federalism. Partisan federalism occurs when political parties' differences shape the relationship between national government and the states. When different political parties control different levels of government, disagreement over public policies often becomes disagreements about federalism. That is, who should have the authority to make important policy decisions. States may establish different priorities based on the choices of their elected leaders, while the federal government sets national priorities and policies. Issues such as voting laws, environmental policy, health care, immigration, and education often illustrate partisan federalism in action. The one thing to remember is this: politics influences how federalism works. Contested federalism. Contested federalism occurs when the national government and the states disagree over who has the constitutional authority to act. These disputes arise from both levels of government, and when they believe that they have the power to make and enforce public policy, contested federalism often begins with different interpretations of the Constitution, overlapping powers, changing public needs, or competing policy priorities. Examples include disputes over voting rights, environmental regulation, health care, immigration enforcement, and education policy. When these disagreements cannot be resolved politically, they often end up in court. The one thing to remember is this: when governments disagree about power, the Constitution becomes the referee. Now let's examine nullification. Nullification is the belief that a state has the right to declare a federal law unconstitutional and refuse to recognize or enforce that law within its borders. Supporters argue that states have a duty to protect their authority when they believe the federal government has exceeded its power. Historically, nullification appeared in South Carolina's nullification crisis of 1832, and later in resistance to federal civil rights laws. Although the idea still appears in modern debates, the Constitution's Supremacy Clause establishes federal law as the supreme law of the land. Ultimately, courts, not individual states, determine whether a federal law is constitutional. The one thing to remember is this: federal law remains supreme under the Constitution. As we have seen throughout this lesson, federalism is not one fixed system. It has evolved as our nation has faced new challenges, changing priorities, and different interpretations of the Constitution. Each module you've studied tells part of that story, from dual federalism with its separate powers to today's continuing debates over constitutional authority and the balance of power between the national government and the states. As you prepare for your exam, don't focus on memorizing isolated definitions. Instead, remember how the relationship between the national government and the states has changed over time. If you understand that story, you'll understand federalism.